So let's start with our class on Scrum. So please, you guys ask questions. I mean, we have this. This is the session we'll focus on for the next hour. You will be gracious to. There's a lot of training, so you guys should be ready to learn a lot. Take your notes and write down. If you want to attend this training, probably it's supposed to take him 2 full days to train you guys. But now trying to put everything together in much less than an hour and still allow you guys to ask questions within 1 hour. So please get ready with your questions and all that. And if 1 hour expires and you still have questions for him, please take note of his name and go and search for him everywhere online and make sure you chase him for your answers. Thank you very much. Over to you. Is a very good friend. We've met. I can't remember when now, but his appetite for excellence. I mean, we're in a training together one time, and I think I got into an argument with him about Scrum. And I said, no, this is it. He said, no, this is it, and all that. And we went on and on for a while before we eventually. So what I got from there is someone who has that clarity on this is standard. This is how things should be. Not just, yeah, we're just going to do it anyhow. He's not that kind of person. That's why I'm so happy that he's been able to find time for us today. He's well learned, he's well experienced, he's worked with government, he's worked in the media, he's worked extensively in Nigeria, he holds a PhD degree. And so it's like you guys are having a lecturer, a university experience combined with an industry experience all together. I'm not very good at introduction, but just take me the way I've mumbled everything together. But in just one short word, you guys are in presence of royalty this evening. So take this 1 hour as very golden and learn as much as possible. So thank you very much, sir. Over to you. And please start by introducing yourself well, because I know I didn't do a good job.
Yeah, you did actually. Good evening, Dari. Good evening, everyone on this call. I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to share my skill, my knowledge with this very auspicious and important group. Just to give an background, my name is Femi Muideen Akorede. I hold a PhD in International Development. I am a Scrum Master and also an Agile coach. I have an original background in comms. I started in journalism. I rose to be deputy editor of these daily newspapers in Nigeria. I then worked for a TV station, and eventually I worked in government comms before I pivoted into Scrum. Before that, I've done stints with the first private TV station in Nigeria, Clapperboard. I also anchored a TV program on DSTV at some point. So very strong background in communication, different facets. What I consider to be the peak of journalism in Nigeria, and I decided to go into comms, and now I've pivoted into project management, especially the agile environment. So what I'm going to do, and so I want to thank Dari for this opportunity. I met Dari on one of the calls, various calls he organized with, I believe, a Scrum Master or product manager with Amazon, Tobeneji. That's how I met him. He likes to give, and we rise by lifting others. And given the immense skills and experience and intellect he has, it's quite inspiring to find somebody that's quite willing to lift others up and share experience and all that. Dari is the kind of person who will reach out and find out how you're doing, how you're getting on, and all that. And the other time, he just reached out and said, "How are you getting on with this situation? We're looking for a Scrum role." It really touched me that somebody would just out of the blue just reach out to you like that, and that's the way he is. So you guys are very lucky that, and I'm sure you know this already, that you are on this platform, and I just milk him. The guy is a walking encyclopedia. So milk him, get all the opportunities you can get from this. And I'm sure you can tell by now, you emerge from this experience much, much better in terms of the skills and experience you have. So without much ado, let me just share my screen and let's get cracking. The intention here is to sort of provide you with a high-level overview of Scrum. As Dari said, this is a training you do for 16 hours over 2 days. So I'm going to do a run through. However, if I rush or I appear to take a too high level look at any particular issue, topic, or process, please make note of your questions, and then I'll be happy to take them later. Right. So before we start, let's just look at what is exactly Agile. This is actually about Scrum, but let's just look at Agile. Agile is an interactive and incremental process of delivering software and process management. It originally started as you know, in the software domain. Or as we all know now, Agile is now used in HR, PR, marketing, legal, several different aspects of you know, aspects and domains of human in endeavor, because people have now seen the value of avoiding this big bang approach of delivering a project. So you just start and you finish it without even checking anything in between. So that, in a nutshell, basically, Agile provides an opportunity to deliver value rapidly on an incremental basis, an iterative basis. What that means, for example, is rather than deliver a website at once, right? You give your customers a chance to say, for example, you do the website, you do the homepage, and you show it to them. What do you think? What do you think about the load speed? What do you think about the feel? What do you think about the UX, which is the experience and emotion it arouses in you when you see that homepage? Based on that feedback, they then go and either improve the homepage or do the next page, and on a gradual basis until the end. And that saves the issue of then delivering a website and discovering later that the customer doesn't like the color scheme. So that, in a nutshell, is what Agile is about. Now, Agile has a certain number of values which are on the screen. Now, the first one is individual interactions over process and tools. What that means is that Agile values group interaction between individuals in the process of delivering a product, rather than just automating a process and leaving it to it. You know, in those old days when you used to have all these big industries, you know, anybody could implement them. It's just somebody just goes somewhere and presses a button, and then at the end of the day, they go pick up the outcome. So, but we all know what happened with that kind of processes. It was not sustainable. The outcome was not always what was wanted, and it was an expensive process of, imagine building, for example, very gov.uk, for example, without using a waterfall approach. And it's a massive website. And if at the end of the day, because somebody just automated something and the website was built, at the end of the day, they discovered it wasn't fit for purpose, and it's a waste of time and resources, and they have to start all over again. So Agile, to avoid that kind of situation, Agile focuses on individuals and interactions rather than on processes and tools. The second value is working software over documentation. You know, this also is self-explanatory. The focus is delivering a working solution frequently. So rather than just doing documentation and writing all sorts of things and saying, developer, go and do it, right? Rather than that, the development team, although that is obsolete, as I'll tell you later, is encouraged to focus on delivering a working software on an incremental basis. So the idea is speed and regular output. There's also a focus on customer collaboration, rather than just focusing on negotiating contract with the customer, saying, okay, you're going to do me a software within 6 months at this cost and to this quality. Rather than having that fixed approach, Agile encourages collaboration with the customer to constantly you know, engage with them and how do you think this project is going? What are your pain points? How can we make things better for you? And all that. And then finally, there's this response to change over following a plan. Now, if you know Agile, which is the linear approach to deliver, Waterfall, which is the linear approach to delivering a software, you know, it starts from conception, design, coding, review, and deployment in different iterations like that. Versions, I mean. And what the problem with that is that this plan is consistently followed regardless of what the customer wants. So if for example, you're building a hotel or a building, the point is do the foundation, do the mainframe, do the ceiling, do the roofing and electrification, and you're done. So if in that kind of situation, you just follow a plan. There's no opportunity for a customer to come in and say, actually, I have a new requirement that I want to. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that it's not as if Agile focuses on the items on the right, on the left, to the exclusion of those on the right. The point is there's a greater focus on the values on the left rather than the ones on the right. So that we get an understanding. For example, a Scrum project, for example, still does visioning, a product vision, and then followed by a product map, right? Which in a certain sense is also a plan, but it doesn't have the waterfall approach where you have, for example, initiate, develop, define, develop, and close the project, which is the waterfall approach that Agile avoids. Now, Scrum is one of several Agile methodologies. There are others like Kanban, there's Lean, there's Dynamic, there's several others, but Scrum is by far the most popular. And by the time we are through with this, you get an understanding of as to why Scrum has the crown for being the most used among all the other Scrum methodologies. Now, this is just to give you a general overview of its history. Scrum dates back to 1986 when a Japanese management expert called Takeuchi and Nonaika, they did a write-up called The New Game on Product Development. And basically the whole point was that they used the analogy of rugby. For those sports enthusiasts, you know, with rugby, the players endeavor to get hold of the ball. And then when they do, the set of team members just, gather around whoever has the ball and then protects them until they take that ball over the line. And that's the whole concept that he came up with. A couple of years later, in 1995, Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber, who became the, I think somebody everybody who is, all right, can we go on mute, please? Thank you. 1995, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, who are described as the originators, the most famous originators of Scrum, then came up with the process by which they presented in a paper about how Scrum should proceed. In 2001, they went ahead and came up with the Agile Manifesto, which I just referred to earlier. Then 2002, they formed the Scrum Alliance, and then 2006, Sutherland created Scrum Inc., and eventually Scrum Org. So those are the two main certification organizations in Scrum. And then they came up with the first Scrum Guide in 2010. They reviewed it in 2017. And then the new iteration came out a couple of days ago, which is the 2020 version, which I'll get to later. So let's talk about Scrum. Scrum is an agile process that allows us to focus on delivering the highest business value in the shortest possible time. Now, that goes back to my original definition in terms of iteration in phases. So basically, the whole idea is to give the production, whether you call them development team or developers, to develop a product, what is called a minimum viable product, within short iterations, intervals of between 1 to 4 weeks. And then once they do that, it can then be inspected and adapted as necessary so that they can go to the next stage. Rather than going the waterfall way, where the whole product is designed and built, and then you now examine it at the end and discover that actually this is not what we wanted, just wasting time and resources. So basically, it allows us to rapidly and repeatedly inspect actual working software or products, and based on priorities that have been set by the business. The team then self-organizes, as opposed to somebody outside telling them how to do their work. They self-organize to determine the best way to deliver those features. And as I said, it takes about 2 weeks to a month to see a working software, which is called a minimum viable product or an increment. I did say that Scrum was the most popular of the agile methodologies, and as you can see on my screen, quite a few organizations, quite a lot actually, use it at the moment. This list is much longer. This is what I accommodate on this page. If you look into marketing organizations are using Scrum now, as I said, HR are using Scrum. Media organizations are using Scrum. So it's massive right now. And that's possibly one of the reasons why the Scrum framework was updated a couple of days ago. And it's also used, as I said, in commercial software, contract development, video games, websites, mobile phones. If you check your mobile phone, for example, even book publishing, you know, I don't know how many people have iPhones or Android phones. Every time those phones are updated, that is like an iteration, right? So they go out, release the phone, people get a sense of use the phone, and then they discover some pain points, okay? Maybe the security flaws here, or the page load is poor, or the picture quality is challenged. The development team at Apple or any of those Android, then take those pain points, which is customer complaints, and then just go in and refine the software and then bring out a new patch or update, which people then use. Now, imagine they just release the software, a phone, and then they just don't bother about it. Whatever happens with the customers, nothing gets done, right? What do you think will happen? We'll have a whole lot of unhappy customers who will not be happy, who will not be happy to purchase that product next time they bring anything out. So that's why these companies consistently do updates. If you go into book publishing for example, there's also the Scrum, an agile Scrum approach, where some books are updated with new editions, sometimes every year or every other year. So again, if you just published a book and went to sleep, and then there are new developments in the market, there are new theories all over the place, but because you adopted a waterfall approach of just delivering a book and just leaving it to the world, you do not get to update the product and make it more market relevant. So that is one of the several areas in which Scrum can be utilized. So what are the key characteristics of Scrum as a framework? There is the self-organizing teams, which I'll explain much further as we go ahead. There's the 1 to 4 week sprints or iterations. The requirements, which is what the customer wants, the value that the customer is trying to achieve as represented in tasks, is what we call a product backlog. They are captured as a list of items in a product backlog. They don't have a specific approach to delivering value, and they use rules to create an agile environment for delivering projects. And it's one of the several agile processes. Now, there are several values. Just like we have values of agile, we have Scrum values as well. The first one is openness. And openness refers to the degree of transparency in the whole agile Scrum process from beginning to end. There's an openness in terms of what is being done. There's an openness in terms of who is doing what. There's an openness in terms of the goals. There's an openness in terms of demonstrating the product to the stakeholders and to other members of the team. So there's no secrecy. Everybody knows what the other person is doing at any point in time. There's also courage to be able to say, I can do this amount of work at this time without thinking about what the other persons will feel, oh, I'm lazy and all that. There's always that environment of psychological safety is created in the Scrum environment for all the team members to feel that they can, choose tasks based on their capacity and availability and willingness without worrying that some other person will condemn them or otherwise disapprove. There's also focus. At any point in time, because Scrum encourages sprint goals, which I will address later. There's always consistent focus on, okay, in this goal, we are going to deliver what? A login page in this sprint. Okay, another time we can deliver a payment feature. Another time we can deliver a shopping cart, assuming we're talking about an e-commerce platform. There's also respect in Scrum. Scrum encourages respect for every member of the Scrum team in terms of their capacity to do what they've committed to. There's that commitment to team values and ethos, and everybody is given their individual respect, and also the team is also respected as well. Then finally, there's commitment. So whenever someone is a member of the team, they commit to the team interest rather than individual interest. The other thing is that they commit to the sprint goal, which is their objective in a particular phase, if you like, or iteration or sprint. So that I don't look as if I'm just carrying on. I hope everybody's going along with me. Can you just respond in the chat if there's if you have any observations or questions as we go along? Any questions so far, or should I just crack on? Hello, guys. Good to go?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Thank you. Now, after that, then we come to the Scrum pillars. The Scrum has 3 pillars. That's transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Now, transparency refers to Scrum's inbuilt capacity to make ongoing tasks transparent, which means everybody within the Scrum team can see what's going on. Stakeholders can also see what's going on. There are several tools that are used for this. There are Kanban boards, there are burn-down charts that are used for this, so that at any point in time, those within the Scrum team, as well as those outside it, would know, and that are relevant to the process, will know what the Scrum team is doing. It also demonstrates to the team what efforts they are making and how far they have gone. Imagine we're building a website and using the waterfall approach where you just deliver based on a big bang. And I am a UX designer. I design customer experience, how customers feel when they use a particular product, and I've designed a particular schema for a website, but I don't get a chance to see how it's going in terms of what the response is, how it fits into the whole process. I'm not going to feel good. So transparency means that everybody can see where the process is in terms of what is the goal, how much work is done, how much work is left, and ultimately what the goal is. Linked to transparency is inspection, which means that team members can be able to inspect what work has been done in terms of whether it has achieved its objective, team members and stakeholders, and then based on that, they can then be able to adapt it accordingly to see if it fits into what they would want. Now, the Scrum framework has 3 basic parts. Those are the roles, the ceremonies, and the artifacts. And I'll take each of them one by one. There are 3 basic roles within the Scrum framework, and that's the product owner, the Scrum master, and the team. The product owner represents the business interest on the team. He is the business voice on the team. He clarifies requirements for the team. He's the only source of information and questions about what the business is trying to achieve within the product, within the Scrum team. The Scrum master is the servant leader whose job is to support the team and make sure that they are practicing Scrum as it should be. Then there's a team. Previously, we used to call them development team, but now they are called developers based on the review that happened 2 days ago. So those are the 3 major roles in the Scrum framework. There are also ceremonies: sprint planning, sprint review, sprint retrospective, and a daily Scrum meeting. And then the outcomes are a product backlog, a sprint backlog, and an increment. I'll take one of them one at a time. Now, assuming this is we're working on an an e-commerce website, right? And then we have a backlog. The backlog contains everything that we want to achieve as designed by the product owner, right? Who is in charge of prioritizing what we call the backlog. The backlog is like a container, right? Of every task that the whole process intends to achieve. So say, for example, in a particular sprint, which is the phase, if you like, they want to treat return as a sprint goal. So we want to do all the process on that e-commerce website that refers to returning a product. So all the tasks that are involved in this return process, right? After we've taken return from this backlog, this product backlog, it now becomes our sprint goal, right? So all the tasks involved in return, all the features of it, right? The number of days you can return a product for, how to request a return, how to request a refund of what you paid for, how to print, a return label. All those processes are what you then put inside the product sprint backlog. So it means that within these 2 to 4 weeks, depending on what is decided, those processes are what the developers will focus on, right? So they probably will just take printing a return label, for example, or requesting a refund. They will take that. They can then take that and then go through this either 2 to 4 weeks and then deliver that. Now, within those 2 to 4 weeks, they do daily meetings called daily stand-ups or daily scrum. And basically, it's an opportunity for the developers to kind of share with other members of the team what they've done. And there are 3 basic questions. There were 3 basic questions. That, again, has changed now. The Scrum Guide is no longer prescriptive in terms of what happens during the daily stand-up. So what you have usually is, what did you do yesterday towards achieving the sprint goal? What are you doing today in terms of working towards the sprint goal? What blockers or challenges are you facing? Now, this meeting is actually for the development team, and is usually facilitated or organized by the Scrum Master. However, sometimes the product owner or sometimes the stakeholders can attend, but they don't participate. They just observe. And so whatever the feedback from that meeting is, it can result in a refined sprint backlog or an improvement in the processes. And so they keep doing these sprints until all the items in this backlog are completed. And then at the end of each sprint, they have a potentially shippable product increment, which means that that particular feature that they did in terms of return, they should have finished that process to the extent that they can then upload that as a finished feature on that website. And so this is just give an overview of sprints. Is about work in progress. Typical duration is 2 to 4 weeks. And because they have a constant duration, it gives them a better rhythm, because they know that every 2 weeks the goal is to deliver a minimum viable product, or 2 to 4 weeks. And everybody knows, again, going back to the transparency that we talked about earlier. I spoke about the team members. The product owner's role, as I said, is to define the features of a product, decide on release dates. There's also issues like the release planning, which we can't look at this time. He's also responsible for making sure that the return on investment is prioritized in the Scrum process, and they prioritize the features. As I said, these features, they prioritize these features in terms of what will be done in a particular sprint, based on what they consider to be important to the business. And they adjust that product backlog per iteration as needed, and they can accept or reject the outcome. The minimum viable product, they can accept or reject it during a ceremony that I will address later. There's also the Scrum Master, who is a servant leader. He's, some people call them a choir master, who just stands in front of the team and orchestrates them, but without actually physically going in there and telling them how to do their thing. And their job is also to remove impediments, like blockers, as we call them in Scrum, to make sure that the team performs at its highest levels. They ensure that the team is functional and productive. And the Scrum Master at times wears several hats. Sometimes they are mentors, sometimes they are teachers, sometimes they are coaches, sometimes they are facilitators, depending on the particular situation. As we know, you go into coaching for several reasons. There are several frameworks for it, one of which I'll share with you, which is RICE. RICE means that, is there a right way of doing something? Is that particular task imperative, which is very important? Is it the S in there refers to, is there a specific approach of doing something? And E is that there's the issue of essential. Is it essential to that process? So once those three are met, the Scrum Master can transit into a coaching situation when he can then have a one-to-one with a team member and coach them on a particular approach. But other than that, they tend to just be there to kind of just ask questions and nudge them and then work with them without telling them how to do. So it's not a hierarchical relationship. Sometimes people find that it's contradictory, because saying that somebody is a servant leader, but that's the whole point. There's no hierarchy in the Scrum team. It's a team for a purpose, because the whole idea of a Scrum, going back to rugby, is that there's no senior player or a junior player. The whole point is that let us all of us work towards delivering a particular outcome. Now, the developers, typically you have between 5 to 9 people. Again, Scrum specifies that in a Scrum team, the ideal number of members is between 3 to 9. Although in the real world, some people tend to extend that. But this is a prescribed number of people in a Scrum team. Then there is the cross-functional, which means you can have a whole bunch of professionals, programmers, testers, US experience designers, database designers, all sorts of people are represented in that team. And one of the key things here is that they don't see themselves, oh, I'm a member of a Scrum team, but I am a tester. No, they see themselves as a team. And that helps with ensuring that there's psychological safety in the team, because we know that we are all working together, we're one, working towards the same objective of delivering a sprint goal. And then members are usually full-time, and they are self-organizing. Self-organizing here means that they're the ones that determine how they will work. They choose how much work they will take on and how they will deliver the work, and to which within what time. In doing that, they do things like story pointing, which is to determine how much effort will be required, say, for example, to produce, going back to the return analogy, to deliver that particular increment or viable product. And there are also the ceremonies. The major one is the sprint planning meeting, which in a normal sprint, in a normal 4-week sprint, should take about 8 hours. Now, the other thing I should mention is that all Scrum ceremonies are time boxed, which means that they aim to finish them within a specific time limit, as part of the effort to ensure there's transparency and that the process is empirical, to say that, okay, in a 4-week sprint, this is how much time you should take, this is what kind of work you should be aiming to achieve, all conditions being normal. Now, within this sprint planning, there's a focus on the team capacity. How many people are in the team that you have? What are their skills? And what is their velocity? Velocity being how much they can produce within a certain time, how much work they can achieve within a particular sprint, based sometimes on things like what they call yesterday's weather, which is what was done previously in a previous sprint. Sometimes they also look at things like, based on experience, this is what the team can do. And then sometimes they use very empirical processes like Fibonacci series and story pointing to determine how many hours or days a particular task will take, to determine how much work will be done. And this is also based on what is in the product backlog, as I mentioned earlier, those items returning, the coupons, buying the product, making a purchase, and all that. And then for the product owner to determine what is priority here, what are we going to do in this particular sprint, and also the business conditions, what's happening in the business, how quickly do they want that feature of returning the product on that e-commerce website. And then that leads to selecting a sprint goal, and then also a sprint backlog, which once there's a sprint backlog is from at the top of that list, which is, the sprint contains a prioritized list, backlog of what tasks needs to be achieved. So they then take those 4 items I showed you earlier and then put them in a sprint backlog. And that's what they will work towards in that particular sprint. Okay, I've described this already. The backlog, the team selects item from the product backlog they can commit to. They collaboratively identify and estimate each item and how long it will take, and then they will do a high-level design. I mentioned earlier there's the daily Scrum, which is also sometimes called the daily stand-up. It's time-boxed. It's held at a specific time and place, usually every day, and it's 15 minutes. And to ensure that people stick to that time, they usually just make it's time-boxed at 15 minutes. Crucially, it's not a status meeting, neither is it for problem solving. It's basically to ensure that the team members, again, in terms of transparency, know what the other person is doing, and what challenges they're facing. So say, for example, a database, a programmer says, I'm trying to code this, but I'm having difficulty interfacing it with an SQL server. If there's a database administration on the team, okay, fine. I actually have some coding to do on the server, but I can help you out with this. So they can collaborate on this. So that's the whole idea. As I said, the stakeholders and the product owner and the Scrum Master are there, but they do not participate in the whole thing. Although it does say here, in the ideal world, they don't participate. It's actually a team thing. But sometimes in the real world, they can, chip in and all that. And the question is, what did you do yesterday? What will you do today? And is there anything in your way, which is what I describe as, do you have any blockers that are stopping you from achieving your objective? Yeah, and then there is there are 3 basic outcomes in Scrum. There's the product backlog, there's the sprint backlog, there's also the product increment. Now, there's some people that will propose a 4th one, which is a Bundan chart. A Bundan chart provides a visual representation of how much work has been done in a particular sprint. There's debate about that, but the Scrum Guide prescribes these 3 artifacts as Scrum artifacts. Okay, I've described this already. Backlog is a prioritized list of requirements that will be worked on in a particular sprint. For the whole project, and it's prioritized by the product owner, who, as I said, is the single authority for defining the business value, the product vision, and the product roadmap in the Scrum team. So this is a sample of a backlog for a hotel application. Allow a guest to make a reservation. The team has estimated that it will take 3 story points. Canceling reservation, they've given it 5. Changing the dates of a reservation, the team has given it 3 points. And so you can see, even from looking at it, some of these roles, some of these tasks, you can tell based on their complexity, the points are higher, right? So, for example, if you want to check revenue per available room for a hotel employee, it will take longer than, for example, changing dates on a reservation, or even allowing a guest to make a reservation, which are much easier tasks. Okay, I've addressed, and the sprint goal is usually a very short statement about what they want to achieve. It can be make the application run on SQL and Oracle servers. It could be something like support features necessary for population genetic studies, or it could be support more technical indicators than the other company with real-time and streaming data. The sprint review is happens immediately after the sprint. So for example, at the end of a 2-week sprint, there's a review where the team does what we call show and tell. So basically they present what has been done and they demonstrate it to customers. And within a 4-week sprint, the sprint review is time boxed for 4 hours. And basically the developers demonstrate the increment they have achieved within that time. And that team is open to the members of the team, the product owner, the scrum master, the developers, the stakeholders, and those who others, and probably sometimes an end user who will use the product. And then they give feedback on the increment. So it's like a demo of what has been achieved in that particular sprint. After the review, you have a sprint retrospective, which is open to just team members, Scrum Master, the product owner, and the developers. And the whole point of that is for them to check what the processes and activities that took place in the previous sprint, what went well, what didn't, and what they would do. So they usually have a model of start, stop, continue. So what are they starting? What are they going to stop? What are they going to continue in terms of what they would do in the next sprint? And that's it here. This is what they do within the sprint retrospective. So that in a nutshell is what Scrum is about. It's much more detailed than this, but I've just done, my plan was to do this for 30 minutes, but I've taken up almost 45 minutes. Let me just quickly then give you an overview. This is something somebody posted on LinkedIn, which is very useful to explain these slight differences in the Scrum framework. You will notice here that this daily Scrum now no longer prescribes the questions. So this new Scrum guide is not only leaner in terms of the number of pages, it is also less prescriptive now. And previously, you had a group, the team members were the developers, the Scrum Master, and the development team. Now, in recognizing the fact that Scrum is now being applied in non-software, increasingly applied in non-software domains. Now we have developers who may be, for example, copywriters in a marketing situation. If it's applied in an HR department, there will be HR executives looking at HR policies in a particular sprint to determine how well they can refine the processes and all that. And then there's also debate about a product backlog refinements meeting. Previously, Scrum didn't actually acknowledge it, but now you have a situation where it's now been acknowledged here in this plan. So usually the backlog refinement takes place within the sprint, usually midweek in a 2-week sprint, so that they will just go back, the Scrum team and the product owner especially, go back and review the sprint in terms of how much work has been done so far. You know, the values are still there. The commitments are still the same, and it's still an empirical process, control process, which is what the approach that underpins Scrum. There's something I didn't mention, which is the definition of done. Now, the definition of done is a set criteria against which every minimum viable product or increment is tested. So, for example, if it's a website, they can look at whether it's responsive, which means it can run on several platforms. They can look at the load speed, how quickly it runs. They can look at the security and several other things. So every increment must be tested against those requirements for it to be classed as a done requirement. And so all these processes I've identified now will then be fed into a loop. Depending on the sprint speed, there could be 2 weeks or a 4-week loop, and it will be done and refined continuously until the product, the final product in a particular Scrum process is delivered and refined until, in the sense of a mobile phone, there's a new patch. And there's an update, and then there's a new patch that's uploaded for phone users to update. Or in the case of a book, there's a new edition of the book which reflects feedback and observations and tests and comments by stakeholders and end users, which is then updated, and also market conditions, which is then updated into a new book. So in a nutshell, that is the Scrum framework that I've just tried to, giving you an overview of in this last 40 to 50 minutes. So that's it in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So there are some questions in the chat window already.
Okay, let me have a look. I can't seem to access them. Okay, let me see.
Oh, really? So there's a question around product manager. So where does the product manager fall in under the rules? That will the product manager also be the product owner in the situation of Scrum?
Is close to the product owner, but they're not the same role. The product manager is primarily focused on designing products, and a product, while a product owner can be a product owner, but a product owner is not actually a product manager. If you understand the distinction, they are not the same roles. Focus on this: a product owner's, a manager's role is focused on designing a product. So a product owner can, for example, do the initial, identifying a particular product, doing the background research, doing the user journey and all that. And then the product owner is then tasked to work with the the Scrum team who produce that product vision that the product manager has come up with. But yes, a product manager can serve as a product owner.
Yeah, and in fact, in situations like, I think methodologies like scaled agile framework put these forms of layers where you have, in fact, even Scrum Agile framework even try to mix it up even a bit more.
Yes. Yeah.
When they shy away from product manager and rather call it product management.
Yeah.
Whereas you can have a few people at that function, then you have product owners in the different Scrum teams.
Yeah.
As well. So like you said, I mean, it depends on the situation. They can be and they might not be same as the product owner. It depends on how the organization wants to use their roles.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question could you share more insights on how the sprint planning is done?
Okay, well, in the sprint planning,
and sorry, one other question that looks like it, I think you can answer together. Talk about how are story points determined. So while explaining sprint planning, you can talk about story points as well.
A sprint planning meeting is done at the beginning of a sprint, and depending on the particular iteration that they've chosen, it can take up to 8 hours in a 4-week sprint. So what they do in that meeting is to determine that, okay, fine, what is the sprint goal? Right? This sprint goal is, let me go to that particular slide. Okay, fine, yeah. So the meeting is attended by the product owner, the team, and the Scrum Master. Again, the Scrum Master facilitates that meeting. And then they decide, okay, fine, what is the goal here? So they can decide based on the priority established by the product owner that in this, again, using the e-commerce website, that in this sprint, we want to deal with all payments, all the features under payment. So let's assume, okay, let's use a banking app. So for example, payments, you can set up a payment, you can delete a payee, you can make a payment, you can pay an external customer, you can pay an internal customer, you can set up direct debits, you can set up standing orders. 7 features under that. So in that sprint, they can determine that they want to do those 7 features under the payment use case, right? A use case is a collection of features. Now, but to determine that, they look at the team's capacity. How many, what's the team's capacity? What is their capacity to deliver those 7 features in the sprint? They also look at the product backlog. Where are we with the product backlog? what is the priority item here? What is the product owner saying is the most important? Is it the payment feature? Is it the login feature? Is it the any of the other features that you can have on a banking app, for example? And then what is important to the business at this particular time, as identified by the product owner? Based on that, they now select a particular sprint goal, right? Now, keep in mind that in a banking app, there are several of those. There's payments, there's login, there is applying, for example, for loans, and several of those things you can do on the banking app. But so all of them is in this product backlog. But based on the business objective set by the business owner, they then choose which of those features that they will produce as a task, or which of those tasks they will take from the container of product backlog and put it in the sprint backlog, so that they will, that's what they will work on within the 2 to 4 weeks sprint. And yeah, if it's a 4-week sprint, it takes about 8 hours. You'll be shocked that this kind of hours go by that quickly, because there's a lot of toing and froing about what can be done and what needs to be done within the sprint plan. And so that, in a nutshell, is what happens in a sprint plan. I hope that clarifies it.
And then the story points.
The story point is an estimation of how much work or effort is required to do a particular feature. So going back to the payment feature, for example, they can ask the developers, how much effort do you think it will take to code and create payee? Now, in order to do that, they use several options, like Fibonacci series, which basically goes from 1, 3, 5, 8, 13, and all that. So basically, you take 1, add 1 to 3, I believe. Let me just
1, 2, 3, 5. 1,
2, 3, 5, 7, 13, and all that. So basically, the team members are invited to estimate, again, based on what they call things like yesterday's weather, previous velocity, and all that, to say how much effort they will use to do that. Sometimes they use hours or days to say, okay, we will use 3 or 4 days to deliver this. Or they use playing poker. So they use cards to estimate. They have small, medium, big, extra large, extra large, and extra small to determine how they would to calculate the estimate. The story points for the particular task that they will be focusing on in a sprint.
Story points is one thing I've always debated within the team. I'm like, why do we waste our time estimating something that is not the exact?
Exactly. I agree with you.
But there is I mean, there's a case for it as well too, because somehow, like you just said, it helps us sometimes. Is it small? Is it medium or large? I think there was this joke I saw on LinkedIn a few days ago where somebody posted like what the senior executives are planning. They'll be like, let's just ask them for estimates and then we'll treat it like deadlines.
Exactly.
That was like the joke, and there was a lot of comments on that post that, oh, you just spoke what happened in my company, things like that. So I think from what you must have gotten from that, Fortune, about the story points, different ways that how it could be done, it's just an estimate. It's not as if they are saying there's no deep science behind it.
Yeah.
We used to do Scrum meetings. Okay, people are talking about the fact that they've done meetings and they didn't need a Scrum. So now, what's your response to people who say they do Scrum meetings weekly?
Well, the thing is, Scrum is adaptable. While Scrum prescribes that you can do sprints within, say, sprints can be of a duration of 1 to 4 hours. Those
hours or weeks?
Sorry, weeks. I beg your pardon. The frequency of meetings should depend on one team capacity and the sprint goal. If it's something you believe you can use weekly iterations for, that's fine. At TriTech, I was discussing with you privately, when the particular team was tasked with upgrading and learning platform, and they were using weekly sprints to to deliver increments. Now, it was a relatively small project, but the point is, which is what I said, team capacity and nature of projects determine the duration of sprints.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So
I can see a question here also about the definition of done. Definition of done, it's a criteria, it's a list of criteria against which every increment or minimum viable product must be checked. So for example, let's use the website example. So, you know, websites are now they now run on several platforms. So you can say, for example, it must be responsive, which means it must run on Windows, it must run on iOS, it must run on Android, it must run on Linux and all that. That's one check. They can also use a non-functional thing like load speed. So how quickly, if I based on a particular increment, once that increment is implemented on a website and I key in the URL, how quickly does the website load? They can have a target that it must load within 10 seconds, right? They can also use loading capacity in terms of how many people can, you know, access the website at a particular time without the website crashing, for example. So those, they have several criteria depending on the nature of the products you're delivering and the specifications of the development or the developers in this case. And because it's actually their responsibility to come up with the definition of done in partnership with the product owner. It's just a set of criteria against which any increment, which every increment must pass before it can be declared as an increment or an MVP.
Indeed, yes. So I hope you got that, the person who asked about definition of done. Then there was a question that has come twice, I think. Can you throw more light on the difference? Now, there was a question before this one. How well can one utilize the Scrum artifacts to make Scrum more effective?
Well, thank you. You know, these major Scrum artifacts the Scrum artifacts are the sprint backlog, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. And they are linear. So for example, your product backlog contains a prioritized list of every task that needs to be executed in a sprint to achieve the increment that the product owner has visualized. So for example, we're building an e-commerce website or a banking app, right? So the product backlog provides the team with a clear insight as to what needs to be done for them to have what tasks they need to complete or aim to complete in order for them to get from point A and to the end of the product roadmap. So it helps with transparency, it helps with targeting, it helps with, in terms of determines the priority, because it's almost like an iceberg. So as the product backlog items are removed, more and more come up depending on priority and size. Then the sprint backlog contains those tasks that the team, based on their velocity and capacity, have selected from the product backlog to say, in this sprint, so this is what we're going to work on. This is what we feel based on what the capacities and skills we have in a team that we can achieve. And so it provides an opportunity for them to be committed to their tasks. Every team member knows what they're doing, and the product owner also has a good idea as to what they're working on. Now, in situations where you have information radiators like boards, stakeholders, Kanban boards, stakeholders can also go check and see what items are they doing in this sprint. And then it also gives them an idea of what to expect at the end of it. Then the artifact is actually the product, the feature, the increment that the product increment, the final artifact is what the team will produce at the end. So it's a linear progress from the product backlog to the sprint backlog, and to what out of that sprint backlog the team can demonstrate to stakeholders and other members of the team during the sprint review.
Okay, there's another question on that. These are questions and tools I need to really have a lot of learning to do. Yeah, so learning is always continuous. Who made that comment? Oluwaseyi. Boluatife, how well can one utilize the, okay, no, that's the question we just looked at. Yeah, can you throw more light on the difference between Scrum meeting and sprint planning meeting? Yeah.
I presume you are referring to the daily Scrum, this daily Scrum.
Daily Scrum, yeah. Daily Scrum versus sprint planning meeting.
The sprint planning meeting takes place at the beginning of the sprint. So say, for example, it's a 2-week sprints or the 1-week sprint that somebody referred to. That means at the beginning of the sprint to say, what is our objective? What is our goal in this sprint, right? So if the sprint is determined to do the payments, all the items under payment, then okay, fine. In this, at the end of these 2 weeks or 1 week, we will have finished the customer features or regarding payment, right? So that's the sprint planning. The daily Scrum or daily stand-up then is a time box 15-minute meeting that gives developers and the team member, provides transparency in terms of what was done yesterday towards achieving that goal of the payment, what they're going to do today, and what challenges they're facing, if any. And that holds every day. So the sprint planning takes place at the beginning of the sprint, but the daily Scrum takes place every day during the sprint, Monday to Friday during the sprint. So if it's a 2-week one, it takes place over 10 days. If it's a 4-week sprint, it takes place over 20 days, as opposed to the sprint planning that takes place once during the sprint.
Okay, so that's clear. Do we have any other question? Okay, no other question. I mean, out of time as well too. So that's good. Thank you very much. This has been a very, very insightful class. I'm sure that these guys have gotten a lot to learn from this. They have the recording to go back to as well, to if they need to revisit this. And if anyone wants to like maybe connect with you on LinkedIn or something, and maybe they have a question and things like that, if you're happy to, you can drop like your name on LinkedIn and all that for them to just search and connect. So yeah, so guys, one of the things is that this has been very useful. This has given you guys a lot of insights, and the expectation is that by the time you guys are grouped into your cross-functional team, each cross-functional team works within a Scrum approach. So you run every week as a sprint. You pick a day for your sprint planning and the day where you review everything that you've done for your sprint review and your sprint retrospective. While we're making sure, the truth is that for you guys to deliver the work you need to do, not everything we are trying to get you to do is essential or compulsory. Let me not use the word essential. Let me say compulsory. That is compulsory. But what I'm trying to encourage that you guys use all the standard and use all these days is that by the time you go out there to look for jobs and all that, you can speak that. Have you worked in a Scrum environment? Yes. How do you do Scrum? Blah, blah, blah. And you know the truth, guys, many of the companies out there are doing Scrum wrongly. I'm going to tell you that. Many places that they tell you, oh, we are agile, they are doing it wrongly. They just like you explained, for instance, now, you have teams calling it a Scrum meeting when it's actually a sprint planning meeting or a sprint review meeting, things like that. But if you guys get exposed to things like this and practicalize it within the team, you will be able to use that in your conversation here and there. All these things can reflect in your CV as well too. So that's the essence of trying to make sure that you guys learn a lot in all of this and put it to practice. And once again, we say thank you very much, Muideen. Thank you for helping us this evening. We've all learned. Even myself, I've refreshed as well too. So really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. So guys, yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll be early next week. We'll be talking about how to get those different cross-functional things to happen. So any questions from anybody? So thank you very much. We're going to have our family meeting after now.
Okay, all right. I will send the slide to you so you can send it.
Great.
Share with the team.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Locate it down, but yeah. All right, yeah. I'll get back to you. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
So you can link up with me on LinkedIn, and we can carry on. Anything you need in terms of Scrum, I will be happy to help out with.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, then.
Bye. Okay. So, all right. Bye.